We welcome you to our channel Logical-NDE, where we narrate near-death experiences from people who claim to have passed away, visited the other side, and luckily got back. In case content such as this hooks you up, do hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons and become a part of our listener community. For our regular viewers, now is the perfect opportunity to relax with a cup of hot coffee and take in today's episode as we describe Rhea's near-death experience, a 23-year-old woman hailing from West Bengal, sharing her spooky encounter with death that will surely leave you with chills running down your spine. In December of 2008, when I was just about 9 years old, I accidentally slipped from the top of our roof in a house located in the east of Calcutta, the place where I had spent the entire first decade of my life. This was a double-story house built by my great-grandfather during the mid-19th century. Winter happens to be a great time for children where I come from, so during that December, my grandfather would accompany me and my two other siblings, and we would spend an hour together on the rooftop playing around. All of this would happen under his observation, but quite unfortunately, my grandfather happened to be a very old man in his 70s who didn't pay a lot of attention to us all the time. During one such evening, me and my elder sister decided to play catch. The walls that surrounded the roof were not very high, and my mother would strictly ask us to keep away from the edges. At one point, my sister and I got way too engrossed in our game. What happened next can probably never get erased from my mind. It is still dates so vivid in my thoughts like it happened yesterday. My sister and I had a yellow-colored ball with us, which we would throw to each other as high as possible and then rush to catch it. When my sister threw the ball to me, I had edged very close to the boundary of the roof trying to grab it. As I saw the ball landing towards me, I quickly jumped on the boundary wall in an attempt to catch it and lost my balance. It took around less than 10 seconds for me to land right down on our car porch. In a moment so stretched, my chest started imploding, and the fear in my heart completely took over me while my eyes fixated themselves on the red brick walls of our house. Those 10 seconds seemed to have lasted forever. I could hear my sister's distant screams in the background. They were primal cries, and had a raw intensity that conveyed urgency and dire need. I lost consciousness as soon as my head contacted the ground and I went limp. There was something that had collapsed inside my chest, and I wondered where the wounds would close themselves now. Everything seemed rotten under my skin. Whatever I saw, felt next was just red. I was aware that death was near, but there was no anguish in me. Everything went still with my pulse as my heart stopped pounding. At that moment, I stopped hearing my sister's screams. I had no idea about how my parents were called and my grandfather was brought down from the roof, or how my sisters were calmed down. For me, everything in the universe halted. I saw no point in trying to gather myself up or fight for my life, so I gave in. It was dark and bleak at first. I observed quietly as I was completely erased as the blackness descended, my eyes wide open but seeing nothing at all. I also accepted the fact that the only indications of my existence, the regular thud of my heart and the chilly air in my lungs, had been taken from me. Everything started disappearing, and only then I started realizing that this was death. This was my death. Moment replaced, I somehow became aware that I was at a hospital at the time, but was unable to hear anything. I opened my eyes and opened them again. A dim misty light was there in one of the room's corners, and it was gradually getting brighter. Even though I could make out a person standing just behind the light source, it was becoming increasingly difficult for me to identify the person as the light intensity grew. I had to squint my eyes to acclimate to the light as it filled the entire space. I became acutely aware that I was floating above the medical practitioners and apparatus that were all around me. They were all scurrying around, doing chest compressions, and hunting for one thing or another. Although the room was in complete disarray, somebody had turned the volume down for me. It was similar to watching a movie without sound. I gently floated above each of them, until I was just across from the body I had been unable to identify before. I can still feel the eyes glaring me down with daggers in them, as I recall studying its expressionless face. I didn't feel scared at that particular time. It took me a moment to realize that the body was actually me. I enjoyed the revelation because I was so relieved to be freed from the burden of my body I had carried for all those 9 years. I could smell the air to be very pleasant as I got carried by my freedom, and the whole place instantly brightened up for me. I walked through a bright tunnel that I found myself in, at the conclusion of which I saw all of my deceased family members waiting for me. They were affectionately calling out to me as I walked towards them, returning their warm smiles. I heard someone suddenly mutter, "Now is not the time," in close proximity. That phrase made me feel exceedingly queasy. Everyone started shuffling away from me. So although I had heard somebody say, "Now is not the time," I really wanted them to stop. And that is when I started feeling genuinely scared. It wasn't until I felt a strong punch in the chest and a shove that I knew how afraid I was of what was about to happen. I was pushed down into a bottomless chasm. I attempted to utter a word or two, but it fell flat on my lips as a sharp pain erupted in my head. All the lights around me were replaced by the redness as soon as the pain kicked. The headache was as if every traffic in my brain had met a red light. I experienced the sensation of falling into a pitch-black, bottomless abyss. That's when my entire body began to experience excruciating pain. I don't recall what happened after, but I was saved by the doctors. As a 9-year-old, I became totally scared by this episode. Despite the fact that it took me a very long time to recover, when my healing process started, it moved me to a newfound stage of life. I didn't quite understand how much trust, patience, and faith in God the entire ordeal had given me until I was an adult. I discovered there was a reality outside of this world that bound the entire cosmos to its inhabitants. Near-death experiences are frequently dismissed as being phony or even made up. The situation in my instance turned out to be rather different. Death, which ought to have horrified me, actually made me feel at peace. It brought me into a world where patience was the foundation for conceptualizing things. I also grasped the significance of timing in human life and how such occurrences in our lives are all tied to one another. This very incident made me fully mindful of my circumstances and truth. Even at the age of 9, I was convinced that this was a moment that would forever alter the way I would think about and view the world. And it did. Every time I thought back on this event throughout my life, all of my sorrow, rage, despair, and self-criticism vanished. I have been completely set free by this event. That was true healing. That is all from the excerpt of Ms. Rhea Jang on her incident with the next life and the revival of her faith. She was made into a better, patient person through it. What did you guys think of her experience? Let us know in the comment section below.